Hi, good evening. San Mateo County's Libraries is excited to welcome you to our author talk with Susie Yang. My name is Michelle, and we'll be going over some housekeeping items before we get started. Your microphone and video will be turned off for this webinar. We'll start with an interview, followed by questions from the audience. Please submit your questions in the Q&A found at the bottom of the screen. Please note, we won't be asking any questions that might give away the ending of the book. For those who'd like access to live closed captions for this event, click on the CC icon in your Zoom toolbar, then click on Show Subtitle. Now, onto our main event, White Ivy. Susie Yang was born in China and came to the United States as a child. After receiving a doctorate of pharmacy from Rutgers University, she launched a tech startup in San Francisco that has taught 20,000 people how to code. White Ivy is Susie Yang's first novel and is in development as a limited series on Netflix with Shonda Rhimes to be the executive producer. We're so excited to welcome Susie Yang. Hi, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So writing wasn't your first profession. Tell us how and why you decided to start writing.
Sure. So I feel like every other writer, I was a huge bookworm growing up. I would read books instead of studying, but I always thought of writing stories like a hobby. And I always had this idea that I would write when I retired full time because it couldn't possibly be a real career, right? So I went to pharmacy school at Rutgers, and I realized probably halfway through my program that I hated it and that I wasn't cut out to be a pharmacist. But at that point, because it's such a technical program, I felt like, oh, it's too late to quit. So let me just get the degree. And then after I graduated, I moved to San Francisco and launched a tech startup and did the whole tech thing for around 4 years. And when my company at that point, I had more time on my hands, and I call it my quarter life crisis. I thought, let me just give myself, 1 year to see if I can finish a novel. Before then, I'd always been writing chapter ones and I've been writing short stories, but I wouldn't let anyone read them. And I was so secretive about my writing. Even when I was writing this novel, only my husband knew about it. Everyone else thought I was still working on my startup when I was in San Francisco. So I thought if I can't finish a book, then clearly I'm not cut out to be a novelist, and I'll just give up on the dream and continue to work in tech. But I did end up finishing it and found an agent, and then that novel became White Ivy.
So you wrote the book while you were living in San Francisco?
Yes.
Oh, yay! Something we could all celebrate. And you did this while managing your startup.
Yeah, although I say that because I feel like it was really just like a two hour a day type of thing, because it was sort of on maintenance mode. It was a learning platform. So we had the video content up, and then, you would have users subscribe to it. So it didn't require my full-time input, which is why I decided to give myself the year to write. Otherwise, I don't think I could have done it with a full-time job. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Why did you choose to title your novel White Ivy?
The working title that I had is actually Let Us Not Ask for Gold. And that comes from, it was a different title altogether. And that came from a poem, which I really liked, which is Love is Enough, Let Us Not Ask for Gold. And it was very tongue in cheek because, for Ivy, the main character, love is not enough. So my agent really liked the title, but when it got to my editor, she thought that it didn't capture the more like noir or thriller aspect of the book. So then we went back to the drawing board and brainstormed. We must have brainstormed hundreds of titles before. I think White Ivy was one of the choice I presented them, and then everyone happened to love it. So we decided to go with that one. And it tied in really well to the proverb of the book in the beginning. The snow goose need not bathe to make itself white. So it became White Ivy.
Got it. So both you and Ivy were separated from parents until about age 5. What else did you draw from your life as inspiration for the book?
Yeah, I feel like because I'm a really lazy researcher, I feel like it made a lot of sense for me to pull in details about, Chinese food or the culture shock of returning. So I grew up in kind of all over the US, but I also went back to China to visit for the first time since I was a child when I was, I think around 14, 15 as well. So that culture shock of, going back to a place you're born, but being unfamiliar with it. I drew that from my experience. I think it's just almost the vernacular of how parents talk to their kids, the value system. I really want to say that my parents and their personalities are so dissimilar, because I think everyone's always like, oh, these are your parents, this is your family. They're not. But at the same time, I feel like I wanted to really make Ivy's background very sympathetic. And I wanted to kind of give her the backstory for why she would be so motivated to do the things that she does as an adult. So I sort of created the Lins out of just probably my imagination, and just like really making sure that the reader understood the kind of childhood Ivy would have to make her feel like such an outsider, and she didn't get the nurturing that she, would have had, and maybe she would have taken a different path in life. Yeah, so it was really just, I would say, the details about growing up Chinese American and the feeling of being an outsider that I really drew on for this book, my own experience.
In a recent article in Oprah magazine, you talk about how your relationship with your parents has improved in recent years. How did writing White Ivy affect your relationship with your family?
Wow, I don't know if writing White Ivy has, because once I had my agent, I was like, oh guys, I'm writing a book, and they were like, great, is this going to be something you're going to be doing forever, or is this, one-time experience you needed to have? But at that point, I think we were already pretty much we already had that the relationship of being equals by that point. There wasn't the feeling of, okay, I need them to approve what I'm doing, or they need to, it was more of just communicating sort of, what I wanted and things like that. I would say the relationship really improved probably when I went to college. I feel like this is true of so many of my friends too. I think distance made it better, because then you could actually miss each other, and go back home and really want to see your parents, and you can appreciate the things they did for you. But growing up, yeah, I wanted to go to college as far away as possible.
For sure. Yeah. I don't think me and my parents are equals yet. Hopefully soon. Hopefully soon. I'll probably always go to them for advice, and as the wise ones. Have your parents read the book?
Oh yeah.
Oh, they have. Okay.
Oh yeah, of course. They read it very early on. I think they were the first people to read it after my husband and after my agent and editor. I had sent my dad the final draft before it went into copy edits, and he was like texting me real-time reactions. Like on this page, he'd be like, but it's actually quite helpful because I was going through copy editing, he would catch a lot of detailed mistakes. So one scene set in China, when Ivy's grandmother goes into the mountain and she has to pay the fortune teller, I think I had her pay something like 500 RMB. And my dad was like, this is ridiculous. This is way too much money for that time period. This should be like 5 RMB. So little things like that he was really helpful with. But yeah, he was quite entertained by the story. He thought it was a very entertaining story, I suppose. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow, I love how he's like texting you while real time
outside.
Oh my goodness.
He said he really loved the philosophical elements of the book. He was like, this is very unique. Yeah, it was fun. My dad and he's also a huge book lover. So I think he could really appreciate it.
Oh, fun. So Ivy Lin subverts the model minority stereotype in so many ways, especially as an anti-heroine who dismantles all the model minority tropes. What's your relationship with Ivy, and what emotions did you hope she would evoke in readers?
So I feel like I didn't set out when I wrote the book to say, let me subvert Asian stereotypes. That happened really naturally, because at the time when I knew that I wanted to write a book, I loved Edith Wharton novels. I love Vanity Fair. I love Gone with the Wind. I was watching shows like Breaking Bad and House of Cards, where there's these male protagonists, who do terrible things, but you're still really fascinated with their journey. So I always knew that I wanted to write the arc of the antihero. I wanted to create a character who would essentially bring about their own demise. And it made sense to, kind of make her Asian American, because that's my background. And I thought that's a character I haven't seen it in literature. And it's something fresh that I can bring to the story. So this idea of a social climber is just really fascinating to me. I think that, that structure can allow for so many, themes and explorations of feeling, questioning why you want something so badly. So I think just by combining those two things, I naturally subverted a lot of model minority stereotypes, right? And in terms of my relationship with Ivy, I mean, I feel about her very similarly to how I feel about Lily Bart, you know, or Scarlett O'Hara, any of these very strong-willed protagonists. You watch them and they're a train wreck, but at the same time, you feel very much, you want to see why they make the decisions they make. You know, you want to see how far they're willing to go to get something. So that was really it was a very simple motivation. I just felt, I always knew the story. I knew where Ivy's journey was going to take her. And I think it was really just the writing her psychology that was very pleasurable for me, like on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
Oh, so when you started writing, you already kind of knew where she was going to
I knew everything. Yeah. I knew from the very first sentence. Yeah. The plot and the parts of the book and her education and her development, none of that has changed from when I conceived the story.
Wow. So it was just like birthed from your head already, fully formed.
Hopefully, probably never happen again, but but yeah.
So I found that I did not like Ivy. It was hard for me to root for her. And did you intentionally create Ivy to be like an unlikable character? Did you like Ivy?
It's so fascinating because I think that maybe I'm just really messed up because I really like really unlikable characters in literature and also in shows. So I think I'm just drawn to that. You know, I liked Ripley, you know, the Telemus Ripley. So I think for me, it's just I find it more fascinating. And so I don't think I ever thought, let me make her intentionally unlikable. But very early on, I did have to decide if I was going to make her a sociopath. So I thought, am I going to go down that route of having this be, you know, the formation of a sociopath? And I thought, no, I'm still going to make her a somewhat relatable, hopefully, human being who then, you know, kind of goes down into the darker paths. But I don't think I think about likability or not when I read characters. I think I am probably just drawn to very, very like Machiavellian characters, I would say. That's my thing. Yeah.
They are more interesting for sure. For sure. Oh, how did it come about that White Ivy is going to be turned into a Netflix series produced by Shonda Rhimes, which we're all very excited about?
How did it come about? It came about, it sort of just fell from the sky, honestly. This was last June, and I got an email from my film agent sort of out of the blue, and he was saying that he had interest from a few of the streaming networks in adapting the show. And so for that entire month, it was crazy. You know, it was just talking to showrunners and producers and big streaming sites, and, you know, people had a different vision for the book. And then I still remember the day when my agent emailed and he said, you know, Shonda Rhimes is reading your novel and she's going to try to finish it tonight. And the whole night I just couldn't do anything but sit there and think to myself that Shonda's reading my novel. You know, I wished that somebody would like live stream her reaction or something, reading the novel.
She could text you.
Yeah, I wish she could text me real time updates instead of my father. Yeah. So you know, that was so exciting. And then as the month wrapped up, we thought, you know, this is such a opportunity to work with Shonda and to see her vision. And so we decided to go with her, and I think she had a partnership with Netflix. So then it ended up kind of coming as a package together. Yeah, so I think right now they're still looking for writers to adapt, last I've heard. So yeah, everyone's always like, what's the update since then? But I think things are just kind of slow probably with COVID. I'm not sure, I have no idea about that world.
Got it. So it doesn't sound like you will be involved that much in the project, or?
No, very early on they asked if I wanted to adapt, and I said no, because I feel like if people out there can do a better job than I would, then I would rather the story be in better hands. I think I want to stick to novel writing. I've had enough career changes for now.
Okay. So you're not like concerned. I mean, I feel like if I were an author, my book would be my baby and I would want to like, you know, try and control all the outcomes, but it sounds like you're very much like,
I'm not like that because I think I have such respect for TV writers. And also it's Shonda Rhimes, you know what I mean? Right, so I'm like, right. You're the expert. I will do whatever you say. So yeah, I don't think I'm attached to it. I'm not like obsessed with the control of it. Yeah, I think it'll hopefully be a good show.
Okay, so who would you want to see play Ivy? I bet you're getting this asked a lot.
I do, but I feel like the names that I know they're like all way too old. Like I'm still thinking, I'm like, I love Matt Damon. You know what I mean? I love Jude Law. Like they're way too old now to play. I don't know who the cool new teenagers and young actors and actresses are. And then for the character of Ivy, I can't think of anyone because in my mind, she's so specific, you know, to how I imagine her. So it's super hard for me to kind of see which actress, but that's something that I'm like really looking forward to as well, to seeing how other people envision her, because I think she's just too specific for me to see anybody else, you know, with her face and how I imagine her to walk and things like that. Yeah.
Oh, you have a way, you imagine the way she walks.
Yes, very
that's
distinctly, so cool. For some weird reason. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm envisioning somebody that that has not yet been discovered. So hopefully.
Oh, that would be really cool.
Yeah, I think, because I don't know. I already have somebody in mind, but I too have a vision of Ivy, and it's not anyone we know so far. Can you tell us what you're working on now, or are there any subjects that you're particularly interested in writing about in the future?
Yeah, so I'm working the first draft of my second novel, which is a love story. It's also set over the course of a decade, and it kind of takes place within the backdrop of the Chinese entertainment industry. So it kind of takes the outsider perspective and looks into a world, and it kind of talks about the immigrant versus expat experience. And it deals with a lot of the themes I think I'm still really interested in, like identity politics and comedy of manners and the public persona versus private selves. So yeah, I think I just tend to be drawn to those themes still.
Ooh, I'm really excited. I love the whole like expat versus immigrant.
Yeah.
Because I experienced that. And
yeah, me too.
Alrighty. Okay. So I think we will be moving on to questions from the audience. There are quite a few. Okay. So again, we're not going to be asking any questions that might spoil the ending for people, because, you know, would hate to do that. So we have a question that asks you to elaborate on the meaning of this quote from the book. Mei Feng always said, everyone had a great future in the past.
I love that quote too, so I'm really happy to point it out, because I don't think any of my other questions have. I think that Mei Feng got like a really great treatment in the book, because I attributed all of my favorite sayings and like wisdoms and proverbs to her. And that quote's my favorite. There's just something very sad about this idea of when you're young, you have a lot of potential, right? But then as you grow up, some of that leaks away and you're more fully formed. But at the same time, you're not seen by society, you know, you're not seen by your peers as this person who can become something great. You know, you're very set in your ways. And I think that's just what I wanted Mei Feng to really tell Ivy, and instill in Ivy that ambition. You know, she didn't want to end up like somebody who people would say that about. She didn't want to feel like she had forsaken her potential and not, you know, lived up to the life that she wanted. And, you know, Mei Feng's proverbs and her sayings kind of fuel Ivy's hunger to make something of herself. And she didn't want to have any regrets. So yeah, I love that quote, because I really do feel like there's something really sad about how we as a society really almost put youth on a pedestal. You know, you can be anybody, you're so great, but I think that adds a lot of pressure too, you know, it adds a lot of pressure and expectations. And so I don't know if it's a necessarily healthy thing. I find it a very sad quote. Yeah.
It's kind of like how Michelle Obama wrote the Becoming book, because she wants people to like not be like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, you can always change what you want to be. You don't have to be one thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. How did you come up with such a single-minded, ruthless anti-hero in your novel? Was she loosely based on someone you know? Ooh.
Yes, me, obviously. I am very ruthless and single-minded in that way. You know, I've been thinking that, because I don't know why I'm drawn to characters like that. And people always want to know, you know, is she based on anyone? And she's not. I think, again, it's just I like literary figures like that. But I think when I analyze and reflect on myself, I'm drawn to characters like that, probably because they're actually quite different from me. Like, I think that I'm the sort of person that tends to be a little bit nihilist. So I tend to feel very much like there's not a lot of point in wanting a lot of the things that other people want. And it doesn't bring me very much pleasure to have those things. And so I'm really fascinated by the opposite of me, which are people who will go to great lengths to get something that they are so sure they want, even if all of society and their friends are telling them that it's dumb or that it's not worth it, right? And so when I was writing the book, yeah, it just made a lot of sense for me to really explore the psychology of a woman who would want to chase, privilege and money and all those things and think that they will make her happy, but yet at the same time, make it obvious that it's not going to make her happy and that, this isn't a happy Cinderella story. So I do think that I added my own, authorial commentary a little bit to how I felt about Ivy's choices, but I did want to see Ivy pursue her path to the end. Yeah.
So you kind of answered this question. Do you identify with the character of Ivy? Not really. And then the question goes on, did you have difficulty acclimating as a Chinese woman to the US? I feel like
that's such a great question. Yeah, as a kid, I have a really bad memory. So I don't remember. I mean, I didn't speak English before I came. I came to the US when I was 5, almost 6. I don't remember not knowing English. Like one day I just did, so I think I was too young. Maybe if I had been a little bit older. So I'm actually exploring that in my next novel because one of the characters is an international student who comes a little bit later in life. So I feel like that experience is really different from mine because I came too young. So I didn't have any of that feeling of, being so different because, you learn so quickly at that age. Yeah.
And you hadn't gone to school yet. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah. Let's see. There are so many great questions. All right. Do you plan on writing a sequel to White Ivy?
No plans. No plans yet, but I guess never say never. Yeah, I just haven't thought about it.
Yeah. The reader said, upon finishing your novel, I wanted to know what happens next.
So do I, but I really haven't thought about it. Maybe one day if I have the urge again to kind of go back to her story, I will, but not anytime soon, I don't think.
We have a question about your process. On a given day when you were writing White Ivy, how much time would you spend on writing? And then did you find that you had certain hours in which you were more creative? Or can you turn on the creative brain when you need to? If only we could do that.
I think I'm 100% a night owl. So when I wrote this novel, even when I was working, I am always more productive at night. So I think the majority of this book was probably written between the hours of like 9 p.m. and like 5 a.m. I just, when it's dark and there's nobody else awake, that's when I can just go into my mind. And so, yeah. And I think for me, it's not about the hours. I know some writers will do hours or words. For me, it was, as long as I was like, I would think of a scene that I wanted to write for that day and then, work on that until I got really tired. So it was just, I think because I gave myself the deadline of the year, like nothing else mattered to me as long as I was making the progress that I wanted to finish the story within that time. So I was always checking in with myself to see how I was on that timeline of completing the story within that year, but not on like how many hours I had to work each day and things like that.
So disciplined, checking in with yourself.
It sounds much more disciplined than it is, trust me. I'm a really extreme person. I'm either, completely heads down working or I can't do anything but lie on my couch and Netflix for like a month.
All right. Another process question. As a first-time author, can you talk about the process of finding a home for your story? For example, how you found an agent, finding a publisher.
Yeah, so I got really lucky because so in the year that I was writing it, around July, book for around 7 months, 7-8 months. And so in July, I went to a writing conference called Tin House. And there I actually just ended up sitting down next to Jenny, who would later become my agent. And she, was like, what are you working on? And I told her about it. And she said, send it to me when you're done. And so that really motivated me, because I had to just kind of tell myself, oh, there's an agent that I met and she's a real agent. And so if I can send it to her and it's good, maybe she'll represent me, right? And so that was in July. And then I ended up finishing the book around October and I sent it to her and she read it within a day. So I was kind of preparing myself for her to kind of, get back to me within a few months, but she essentially emailed me the next day and said she'd read it overnight and she loved it and she wanted to meet up. And then after that, we sold the book, I think around Thanksgiving, or maybe early December. So that process of kind of selling the book was really fast, but then what came after that was then I worked with my editor for almost 2 years on the edits of White Ivy. So yeah, I think it's a little bit misleading to say, oh, this whole process so fast, I wrote it so fast, because I really think when I look back now on the version I sold, I'm like, oh man, it was so bad. So I really think the editing process was part of me learning how to be like a real writer and how to think about craft and how to think about plot and structure. So it was really necessary those 2 years to write this book. But in terms of selling the book, I think I was really lucky in that sense.
So to clarify, there's an echo. Huh.
Can you hear the echo, or is it okay?
I think it's gotten better. Okay. Sorry about that, friends. Okay. So it sounds like you finished writing in July and then you sold your book in October. Am I getting the timeline correct? Uh-oh.
Is my audio kind of funny still?
I can hear you now.
It's slightly tinny. I can take out my headphones.
Try that. Yeah, go ahead. Let's go ahead.
So I was kind of like 2/3 of the way done when I met the agent in July, and then I sent her the finished manuscript in October, and then we sold it in November. So she had read it and taken it out to editors, and it took around 1 month to sell the book from when she had read it.
Got it. Okay. Oh, I'm not sure if this is, I feel like this could potentially be spoilery, but we'll still ask it. And you can decide. Did you consider alternative endings? And if so, I think if you tell us what they were,
Because I did not.
Oh no, okay. Because the person
who read it would know what the ending was, and I definitely did not consider any alternative endings. Yeah.
Right, because it was fully formed. Can you tell us more about your inspiration for creating the Mayfeng character? I found her to play such a key role in Ivy's development. For sure, yeah.
My favorite coming of age stories, I think that age, you're so impressionable to the role models in your life. And they don't even have to be role models. It can really be somebody's life who you see, you want to emulate them, or somebody who takes care of you. And so I knew that I wanted Ivy's childhood to develop a very specific mentality of the world. And that mentality was her grandmother's, which is a very dog world. So her grandmother is very much telling her, you have to be resourceful, you have to be self-reliant. And that's kind of the message that Ivy gets growing up. And then there's the theft as well. And she knows that she can break the rules and that rules are arbitrary and that she can get away with it, right? And so that's how I came up with the Mayfeng character. And then, as Ivy goes on through life, she is influenced by different women in her life. There's her mother, there's Susie Speyer. So she's kind of learning from all these women, but Mayfeng was sort of the original, educator who taught Ivy essentially that it was kind of a dark place in this world and she needed to kind of look out for herself. Yeah.
Speaking of women in her life, Ivy's mom's name is Nan, right? And I think in the book you say she was named Nan because that means man. But when I came across that portion in the book, I was like, oh, but it also means hard in Chinese, right? Nan. Yeah. So I was like, oh, and maybe it's like a play on both, like, because she's also I feel very, very tough on Ivy and like extremely hard, kind of like she's not soft at all. Like Mayfeng is the one who comforts her. So I was wondering if you also thought of that as well.
I should start saying that I
Totally.
did.
Alrighty. Did you have any imposter syndrome writing a novel without like a degree or a background in literature or creative writing?
I question. I don't know that I did, because I didn't really think about what would happen after I finished the book, because I've always been writing my whole life. You know, I've journaled, I've written stories, I've just written so much already on my own. So I didn't really think about it as like a different thing. You know, to me, the only difference was that I was giving myself permission to do it full time, to finish a big project. But it was still mostly for myself. You know, it was to see if I could even finish a book and not get bored with it in between. So I don't think I had any of that while writing it, but I definitely experienced some of that going through the, you know, the publishing process, because I had no, I had no idea, you know, about contemporary writers or how the publication process worked, or how, you know, marketing worked, or PR, and even just the vernacular that my editor would use on her edits. I would have to like look them up, like, what does this mean? So just little things like that, that somebody who would have had an MFA would probably have known. I definitely had to learn all that through the publication process itself. Yeah. So that was the time when I was the most stressed out, I would say.
Okay. So I think we're having a little issue with audio. If you could just move. Oh, now we can't hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you now. I think if you move
Is that okay?
I think so. Let's continue. I'm glad you didn't have any imposter syndrome. I love that this was like not while writing. I love that this was like a gift for yourself. I just love that, you know, this was for you, and all the awesome stuff that's happening is just like, you know, a product of an awesome book. Okay, yeah. Let's see.
It's also something that I'm scared of losing, you know, in the future, to be perfectly frank. Yeah.
That makes sense. Oh, here's an interesting question. Is White Ivy going to be translated into Chinese?
Not yet, but it will be, or I don't know if ever, but it hasn't gotten sold. The rights haven't been sold in China yet. I mean, it gets sold by each country. So I think right now there's a handful of languages that it will be translated to, but I don't think Chinese is one of them.
I feel like it would do well in Singapore. I don't know why. I don't know why. Let's see. What was we're getting into the plot now. What was Sylvia's motivation for encouraging Ivy and Gideon to be together?
So actually I did a panel, and one of the librarians, actually, she was so astute. So she basically kind of understood my intent, which was that the Speyer family and the Lins are actually very similar. They both care a lot about appearances. And so I think the Speyer family saw Ivy as someone who they could also use for their own good. So I think in a lot of sense, they understood what kind of person Gideon was, and they saw a girl who was very willing to be molded into their family. You know, she would fit that role, and Ivy would understand what rules, you know, she would have to subject herself to. So when I was writing the novel, I actually found on a personal level, the Speyers to be a very like sinister family. You know, they don't ever tell you what they want, but they will try to help you discover what they want, you know, for themselves. And I think that was very much Sylvia. Like, she, you know, wanted to be very encouraging, but at the same time, she was trying to groom Ivy in a sense for her brother. And that was my intention, at least. Yeah.
Was the family or any of the other characters inspired by anyone in your life?
The family or any other characters? Not in terms of personality. I mean, everybody really served the story. Like, different people would be inspired by a different, like, nugget. For example, the character of Rue, when I was in 3rd grade, I had a Romanian friend, and she had an older brother who rode a motorcycle around town, and his name was not Rue or anything, but for some reason, this idea of this neighborhood boy who was a bad boy and a little bit seedy, like that feeling, you know what I mean, that Rue has, like, that came from that experience. I think all authors feel that way. It's never black and white and tangential. It's always little fragments of things that you kind of pull together to, and for some reason, those end up being the ones that feel the most true for the character. So yeah, I think that was the case for almost all of the characters in the book.
Ivy's younger brother, Austin, is decidedly a cipher. Can you comment more on Austin as a character?
What is a cipher?
I mean, I think they mean like he's kind of like a mystery, kind of. I think that's what they mean by that.
To me, it was really important to have the character of Austin because I wanted there to be a foil for Ivy's upbringing. You know, I think so much of this book is how much of Ivy's, you know, personality is nature versus nurture. You know, you could say it's her parents or her, you know, her not fitting in at school, but at the same time, you know, her brother kind of had a very similar upbringing, but they kind of dealt with it in very different ways. And so I wanted to show how, you know, with that kind of childhood and the feeling of not fitting in or not being supported or not having, you know, communication with your family, how it can bring about two very different people, you know. So Austin, I think he's probably very repressive, you know, he is depressed. He feels like he doesn't have, you know, anyone who can really understand him. And then Ivy sort of becomes what her grandmother wanted her to be, which is very tough, you know, like tough it out, right? Just assimilate, you know, kind of game the system. So I did want to show that people can react to very similar upbringing, but kind of become very different people. It wasn't just, I don't think it was excusable to say, oh, Ivy just became that way because of her family, you know, so.
Okay. Ivy is the main driving force of the story. She also has complex relationships with the other women in her story, her mom, her grandmother. Do you feel that they are representative of generational maternal relationships for the second generation immigrant family? Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah, I do, but I don't even think that it's necessarily second generational immigrant family. I think it's like every generation, every family in like the history of existence. And that's actually why I wanted to include Nan's backstory because, you know, I think that when I grew up, right, I always thought, you know, there's so much cultural misunderstanding between me and my mom, right? You know, it's like there's a language thing and then there's, you know, the American values versus the Chinese values. So there's so much more on top of the difficulties of just mother-daughter, you know, or parent-child that I think that our generation of immigrants, we do have to deal with. So, but with that said, when you go back and look at Mayphone and Nan, you know, they technically don't have the language barrier, you know, they don't have the cultural barriers, but at the same time, Mayphone still so drastically misunderstands her own daughter as well. So I did want to show that it's not just a cultural thing. You know, I think a lot of things, of course, it makes it tougher for, you know, to understand each other's values, you know, but at the same time, you can't just say, oh, it's because I'm an immigrant or, you know, you don't understand American culture. I do think it's very universal to have a certain idea of your child and then to have them not be that way and for it to be very surprising to you. So I think that was my intention for kind of highlighting the two different stories between the three generations of women.
Oh, this one's interesting. What incidents in your own life color the views of Ivy and her family members?
What instance in my own life colored Ivy's view of her family? I think it was just probably being the daughter of immigrants, right? I mean, she goes to a school and, you know, there's nobody who's Asian there and she likes, you know, Golden Boy, but she doesn't really dress like anyone else. And even the scene of her wanting to go to the sleepover, right? Like I remember being a child and I would beg my parents, let me go to a sleepover. And they would be like, why would you want to sleep at a stranger's house? And that was like something that they couldn't understand. So, you know, I think it really just, that stuff was probably very cultural. You know, it was that she wants to be very American and fit in with this very posh school and her parents want her to study hard, you know, and get good grades. So I think that's quite common. Probably every immigrant has had that type of experience with their parents at some point growing up in America. Yeah.
Ivy's motivations and struggles seem to be much more caught up in wealth and class than race. What was the inspiration behind that choice? And what do you believe was the motivation behind Ivy's struggles, wealth, class, race?
The class thing I do think was Ivy's main, it was like the main motivation that she kind of spun all of her decisions based around. As for why that is, I just think it's such a very classic trope novel, you know, the social climber. I think it's still a really fascinating topic for today. And I kind of wanted to try my hand at it. I don't think going in, I thought let me tackle race, but I did want to tackle this idea of somebody who wanted to fit in and understand how money was different than wealth, and how wealth was different both in China and in America, and how her parents, how they thought of money versus how the Speyers thought of money. So to me, those just felt like natural subjects I was drawn to. I just think that class is something, it's like you can use that to explore so many different themes of like how people view the world differently, and how people will kind of go about different ways of scheming to get, to climb the social ladder. I think that will probably be the case for a long time in any type of capitalistic society, right?
For sure,
yeah.
For sure. And it's pretty much a universal issue, right? Anyone wants to change. Okay. So Ivy is fascinated by white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, WASPs, and frequently contrasts them with her own Chinese background. Why did you choose to focus on both cultures?
I wanted to create like an ideal family that Ivy aspires to that was very different from her own. So it could have been anything, I thought about setting the book at one point in New York, because I also spent a lot of time in New York, but there's also a very specific stereotype of, like the wealthy Manhattan family. And then I thought, okay, let me set it in Boston, because it feels the aesthetic of the New England, family is a little bit different. So to me, it really could have been any type of family that is held up as success in America. If it was set in San Francisco, it might have been a different type of family that Ivy aspires to marry into. So I just wanted to give her, that world that she kind of idealizes. And the story, I think, isn't necessarily about how great that world is. I don't think I am trying to show how great it is to be a WASP, or how wonderful it is to be, to be that. I think it really was just her feeling that that's not what she has, but that's what she wants, and how she's going to go about getting it. That was what interested in me. Yeah. So I think it was just a story decision to kind of create this WASP family in Boston. Yeah.
And I think I read in an interview, you talk about privilege, and that's kind of really at the heart of what like Ivy wants. And to me, that was just like a revelation, like, oh, duh, that's really what she wanted, because she didn't really have any of that. And then when okay. Anyway, sorry, getting off topic. When you were writing White Ivy, did you ever imagine it going as far as transforming itself into a Netflix series?
I mean, no, I sort of answered it, but I didn't imagine anything beyond queering agents after I wrote White Ivy. And it's also so strange because, it took longer than normal books, I think, to even come out. It ended up coming out in COVID, right? It was 2020. And not only did it come out in COVID, but actually my book came out on election day in the US. So it's felt like every step of this process has been completely outside of my control. So whether it's good or bad, and I think I've been really lucky at how much attention this book has gotten in 2020. But with that said, it really feels like every step of the way, I've just taken things in stride, because it's completely outside of my control. And in a way, it's been kind of freeing. All the anxieties about trying to control, all these things. I don't think I've had that, because I've just completely let go of last year. Whatever happened, happened. And I think everybody's felt that way. Yeah.
Oh, this is a fun one. How did you celebrate when you finished your book? Did you have a celebratory meal?
I think I ate carrot cake. I mean, I'm a big cake person. So my way of celebrating is I get a huge cake that I would normally not be able to eat by myself, and then just eat it.
That sounds amazing.
Like a week, yeah.
Is carrot cake your favorite?
I do love carrot cake. Yeah, I love a good carrot cake.
So you finished writing the book while you were still in the Bay Area, right? At that point?
So toward the end of it, actually was traveling abroad. I was living in San Francisco, and then I went to Thailand in the middle, and then I actually finished the book when I was in New York. So not the whole time. I wasn't in San Francisco the entire time.
Wow, so disciplined. I would have just been like, oh, now that I'm traveling, I'm just gonna set this thing aside and, hang out. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit more about your writing process? Do you start with an outline? I guess somebody wants to know if you write your drafts in a particular software program, for example.
Nice.
Software.
I'm so happy that you asked this because I love the software program called Ulysses, which not that many novelists I know use. Everyone uses, I guess, Word, or they do, what is it, Scrivener? That's a big one. But
yeah,
I've been using Ulysses since the very beginning, and I really love it. It feels, it's like a big file, just like a big filing system, but everything's in the cloud, so I don't have to worry about it possibly getting lost. And I can also sometimes edit on my iPad because it's, you can pull it up on your phone. So yeah, I really recommend that software. It's really easy to file things too, and you can do all kinds of really cool like tagging, and you can do, you can like merge sheets. You can export it as a Word file. I think they should hire me to be their spokesperson. Anyway, I really, really love Ulysses. And then in terms of, was it writing process, do I outline? I don't outline, but what I will do is I'll have a general synopsis. It's very similar to, as I'm writing this next book, I think it was quite similar to White Ivy. I have an idea of what I want to say. So I generally know, I have an idea of what I want the story to show and explore. And then once I have that driving force, I think about the best kind of setup and setting and kind of relationships that would best showcase that. And then once I have that, then it's the plot. And then once I have all of that, then I start writing. And honestly, all of that is probably in my head. I don't have an outline. I don't really, like say chapter 1 is about this, chapter 2, but it's the big arc and how it will play out. And then I start writing. Yeah.
Oh, what was the hardest part of writing this? Of writing the story? I
think the hardest part was the editing. I've gotten used to, I will edit as I write. And so once I write the end, I'm bored of it and I want to put it away and start something new, right? But then because you're a professional, you must do many rounds of edits. So that was really difficult. It was being extremely exacting, very precise, fact-checking, kind of rewriting the same sentence a million times, rereading everything so many times. That part was very unnatural to me. I think I'm a very intuitive writer. So I tend to just write everything very quickly and then put it away. So really having to refine things on that level that required a level of discipline I did not know I had in me. So I think that was really hard. Yeah.
Was there a time when you got sick of what you were writing and wanted to abandon it?
I don't think so, because it was already I was already too far in the process, and I wanted, at that point when I was doing the edits, I wanted to make it as good as possible. But then after it came out, I was so sick of it. Like, I haven't opened the book since it came out. I don't even want to look at the cover. Like, I'm really scared to open the book because I'm afraid I'll see a sentence that I hate, but now it's too late. So yeah, now I don't even want to look at it. Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. All right. What are some of your favorite novels? And do you have any authors that influenced you as a writer?
I think I named a few. Edith Wharton, I loved Vanity Fair. I would say growing up, I read a lot of Steinbeck. I really loved East of Eden. I loved coming of age stories. So one of my favorite books is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. I also love Norwegian Wood. Like, I'm a rereader, so I will read my favorite books 2 dozens of times. So all those books I've read so many times. And then recently, I feel like one of my favorite books I've read probably of the past few years is Stoner by John Williams. It is so good. I mean, I won't spoil it. It's when I tell the plot, it sounds very dull. It's about a teacher at a university, but it is so moving. So Stoner by John Williams, I think everybody who likes literature should read it. And then I also just love kind of fiction written by women. I love Elena Ferrante, I love Ottessa Moshfegh, I love Sally Rooney. So yeah, I read pretty widely, but I would say the ones that have influenced me growing up were the books were the authors I mentioned earlier.
Oh, as a librarian, I have to ask this question. Do you have any fond memories of libraries growing up? And if you don't, that's okay too. You can say, "Oh, that was this really mean librarian," and that's fine.
No, even No, even in my book, I had that one sentence about how libraries became Ivy's daycare essentially, because she would just kind of get dropped off there. And that's where she learned to read. And that was absolutely my experience. So I grew up kind of all over the US, but I remember living in Baltimore at one point, and like they would have, I don't know if you guys still have this, but they would have like a maximum number of books you could check out. And back then it was 30. So I would just check out 30 books every time. And I was a huge like Sweet Valley reader. I loved Animorphs. I read them all, right? But I would get them in like bulk, and I would just read them like back to back, and I would put it back and get more. Because back then, for my family at least, it was buying books was like a luxury. So other kids would kind of get the scholastic, like you could buy the books.
Book orders.
Yeah. I never got that. Like my parents were like, why do you need to buy these books? You can just go get them for free at the library. So that's really where I nurtured everything about my love for writing. I would never have read all the books that I did if not for libraries. Yeah.
So good news, we don't have a limit anymore. Well, it's like 100, I think. That's so many books. I think growing up for me, for kids, you could only check out 6 books if you were a kid. But that is in the past. Let's see. What advice do you have for writers in our audience? You have been extraordinarily successful with your first book. Would-be authors would love to hear more about how you went about writing. I think the question got cut off. Sorry. So what advice do you have for writers in the audience?
I would say one thing that's helped me is another writer who I workshopped with. He recommended a book called Art and Fear. And it's not about writing, but it's about making art in general, but it's really applicable to writing. And I found that really, really motivating for me when I read that in the beginning of writing White Ivy, because I think every writer has this idea of creating the perfect American novel. You're working on it for so long, right? And you want it to be so perfect, but the book talks about how that's essentially impossible, and it gives the analogy of a ceramics class where the teacher splits up the students into 2 groups. And in the first group, he tells his students, if you make the perfect pot, like you'll get a better grade, right? So the quality of your pot will dictate your grade. And then the second group, he said, your grade only depends on the number of pots you make. So if you make 41 pots, you get a higher grade than if you made 40 pots. And so these 2 groups went about their lives. And at the end of the semester, he found that all the kids who had made 40 pots, all their pots were better than the people who had spent this entire time trying to make 1 perfect pot. So I would say just make pots. Yeah. just don't try to do it perfectly, just write what you want. And then, that would be the other piece of advice, which is write what you want to read. I think don't worry about writing it for someone else or writing it to impress anyone or writing what you think agents will like. Just write what you would really want to read, and don't give up the pleasures. Don't turn off your reader brain. Keep your reader brain on and think about what you would like, what gives you so much pleasure to read, and then try to write that. Yeah.
Well, that sounds like exactly what you did for White Ivy, because you love anti-heroes, and she is quite an anti-hero. Let's see. I think, let's see. Ooh, this is a good question. Any ideas when we will see White Ivy on Netflix?
I have no idea.
We're all very excited.
I feel like it'll be a while with COVID and their filming schedules, but I'm just as excited as everyone else. Yeah, I don't know.
When will your next book be published?
I also don't know. I mean, I'm still writing the first draft.
Okay.
I'm hoping to send it to my agent to read probably within the next month or 2. But I mean, if this goes anything like my last book, I will be editing for quite a bit of time with my editor as well. So, but hopefully, yeah, I'm working hard on it, but no promises. I feel like these things are so uncertain.
Yeah. With agents, do they ever read your story and if they see I guess I'm wondering, are they kind of like editors and they're like, oh, if you change this, it might sell better, or do they give you any advice on that?
I can't speak for other agents. My agent never did. She essentially read my first book and said it was ready to be sold. So we didn't even work on edits, you know, which I had sort of been preparing myself for. I don't know. I can't speak for other agents. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, yeah. I only know about the process of reading books, not, you know, the making of them. And let's see. Okay. What do you think of the electronic format of books? Our library system allows access to any book you can hear or read if you have a library card. Some people can't adjust to reading electronically and prefer holding paper or the actual book. Do you have a preference?
I love both. So, I mean, I love a physical book because I like to, when I write, I just like, there's something about seeing it on the page that like triggers a different part of my brain. So I will buy most of my books, but because I travel so much, I can't really go anywhere without my iPad or Kindle either, because then I can read on the airport and then I don't have to lug around, you know, like 10 books with me. It drives my husband crazy because my suitcase is just all books at that point. So I would say that in my day-to-day life, I buy books pretty much compulsively. And then when I travel, I will buy books on electronically. And if I really love a book, I buy both. So just so I don't have like a fear of not being able to access it at all times. Yeah.
Ooh, somebody has asked a question that's near and dear to my heart. I love audiobooks, and a reader or a listener listened to the audio version and they loved it. And can you speak about the process? Did you get to choose the reader? How did that work?
Yeah, I was really lucky in that I think when they were beginning to record the audiobook, they had sent me samples of work that a few narrators had done. And obviously I listened to it. I got, you know, so many of my friends' opinions. And I think so many of us love, so the narrator is Emily Wu Zeller, right? And I think she did some other really great books. And so I just like heard her voice and I really loved it, loved the way that she had, you know, read in the past. And so, so then I told my team that she was my first choice, and then she ended up agreeing to do it. So I'm really, really pleased. I haven't listened to the whole thing. I think I've only listened to maybe the first chapter. I'm waiting for someone to like give it to me for free.
I'm sure you can ask. I'm sure
I'm like too embarrassed to ask.
I'm sure you can.
Yeah.
Oh, somebody is also a Rutgers grad, and they were wondering how your experience at Rutgers influenced your writing journey.
I would say in two ways. One is that because I hated pharmacy school so much, it really like made me think deeply about like how to like transition out. I think if I had studied something that I was better at or more fond of, I may not have been as motivated, you know, to move to San Francisco and to take these risks in my career. And then the second thing was with my friendships there, because it was such a small program, there was only 200 of us kids. We had every class together essentially for 6 years. And so like my friends and I, we became so close, and they've always been so supportive of me and of my writing process. Like even when I was publishing this book, so many of them would tell me stories about, and I don't remember, but like they claimed that at the time I was telling them that I was going to write a book about an Asian American girl and all this stuff. I was going to like open a magazine or something. So I would say those are the two things that I really brought out from Rutgers with me. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Ooh. So a reader's favorite segment is, I'm going to read it. They want to know if this is your original writing or a quote from somebody. So the quote is, "What was this cloak called privilege? How did it protect us? Was it visible to the wearer or just to onlookers on the outside?"
Is the question, did I write that or?
Yeah, they're wondering if it's original or if it was quoted from somebody, and then if it's, you know, yours, could you elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, it's very much original. I think everything in the book has to be, otherwise it's plagiarism. unless you cite it, right?
Right, yeah.
So yeah, I definitely wrote that. And I really love that quote because that was a scene where Ivy feels the gap between, you know, her and Gideon's world. Like he kind of took her to this very fancy tech party barbecue thing, and she feels probably very unambitious or underachieved compared to Gideon's friends. And she feels, and I think in particular, she contrasts the way that their family dynamic is. You know, at that party, she meets another little, you know, Asian girl who is beloved and, you know, will grow up surrounded by, you know, very loving and wealthy parents. And so she feels very much like she wonders at that point, you know, how did I become who I am, and who would I have been if I had grown up differently? I think that's when she questions the cloak of privilege. Like she wonders if the people at the party, do they know how privileged they are, or is it only something that you can see if you're not privileged? Yeah.
I think it's something you can only see if you're not. All right. Anyway, who cares what I think? Oh my goodness, Susie, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we cannot wait for the Netflix and your next book.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you everyone for coming. There's so many people who ended up coming.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a good evening, everyone. Oh, and just to let you know, we did record this, and I believe we will be posting this onto our YouTube channel sometime later this week. So if you missed it, or you had such a great time and you want to share it with friends, please do so. And you can find it at our YouTube channel. Have a great night.
Thank you.